Today's story delves into the mysterious and heartbreaking case of Yumi Ohmasa, a young Japanese university student who disappeared under baffling circumstances during what was meant to be a joyful trip to South Korea. On March 27, 1991, 24-year-old Yumi Ohmasa, hailing from Ehime Prefecture in Japan, embarked on a journey to South Korea to explore the historical city of Gyeongju. Having just graduated from university, Yumi was preparing to continue her studies in graduate school. However, before diving back into academia, she wanted to fulfill a long cherished dream of traveling to some of the world's most famous cultural sites. Gyeongju, with its rich history and proximity to Japan, seemed like the perfect destination. The city, often referred to as a museum without walls, is known for its well preserved ancient relics, temples, and tombs that date back to the Silla dynasty. Yumi's journey began with a ferry ride from Japan to Busan, South Korea. She arrived in Busan around 10 a.m. on March 27th and immediately made her way to Gyeongju, where she had pre booked a stay at Gyeram Youth Hostel through a travel agency. Her excitement was palpable as she looked forward to exploring the historical sites she had only read about in books. She planned to stay in Gyeongju for a couple of nights, immersing herself in the city's rich cultural heritage. Her first 2 nights were spent at the Gyeram Youth Hostel, which was conveniently located near the famous Bulguksa Temple. Eager to experience the history around her, Yumi set out on her first day with a sense of adventure. However, unfamiliar with the area and overwhelmed by the excitement of her travels, she soon found herself lost. Fortunately, a group of Korean office workers noticed her wandering and offered their assistance. Intrigued by the sight of a foreign visitor keen to explore Korea's history, they guided her back on track. Grateful for their help, Yumi shared a meal with them before they accompanied her back to her hostel around 9:20 p.m. that evening. She checked in alone and, after a night of rest, prepared for another day of sightseeing. On the morning of March 28th, Yumi left her hostel at around 10 a.m., leaving her key at the front desk as usual. This was the last confirmed sighting of her. What was supposed to be another day of exploration turned into the start of a long and harrowing mystery. Yumi's disappearance was not immediately noticed. Back then, it was common for travel agencies to handle accommodation bookings and settle payments on a weekly basis. It wasn't until April 3rd, nearly a week after Yumi's last sighting, that a travel agency employee arrived at the hostel to settle her payment. The staff at the hostel mentioned that Yumi had left her belongings behind and had not returned to collect them. This puzzled the travel agency employee, who initially assumed that Yumi had already returned to Japan. However, attempts to contact her were unsuccessful, raising concerns. On April 9th, Yumi's family in Japan reached out to the travel agency, worried that she had not returned home as planned. They had expected her back by April 1st or 2nd at the latest. The agency realized the gravity of the situation and contacted the Ministry of Justice to check if Yumi had left South Korea. When no records of her departure were found, it became clear that something was terribly wrong. The agency promptly reported Yumi's disappearance to the local police, who immediately launched a full-scale investigation. They established a task force to search for the missing woman, scouring Gyeongju for any sign of her. According to the hostel staff, Yumi had left the hostel on the morning of March 28th, dressed in a green t-shirt, jeans, a blue cap, sneakers, and carrying a crossbody bag. She left behind some of her belongings, including socks, underwear, and about 3,000 yen in cash, indicating she had intended to return. The police began an extensive door-to-door investigation, searching for any leads on her whereabouts. By 3:30 p.m. on March 28th, they discovered that Yumi had dined at a local restaurant where she ate naengmyeon, cold noodles, a popular Korean dish. Locals remembered seeing her, but in the early 1990s, surveillance technology was limited, and the investigation relied heavily on eyewitness accounts. Unfortunately, this lead was as far as the investigation would go, as no further sightings of Yumi were reported. Yumi, who spoke little Korean, carried contact information for the travel agency and the youth hostel, hoping to use it in case of an emergency. Despite this preparation, she vanished without a trace, leaving the police with few clues and growing concerns that something dire had occurred. The surrounding area of the youth hostel included mountains, leading the police to consider the possibility that Yumi might have gone hiking and met with an accident. They organized a search operation involving 50 officers and helicopters to comb the nearby terrain, but no evidence of her whereabouts was found. The investigation expanded to explore other possibilities, including the grim prospect of human trafficking. The police investigated local gangs and organized crime groups that might have been involved in her disappearance. However, no significant leads emerged, and the trail grew cold. The lack of evidence frustrated investigators and left Yumi's family in a state of agonizing uncertainty. As the weeks turned into months, hope began to fade. The Japanese police, though unable to intervene directly due to the incident occurring in South Korea, kept in close contact with their Korean counterparts. Yumi's family reached out to her school, friends, and any potential contacts, desperately hoping for any sign that she might have returned to Japan, but their efforts yielded nothing. In July 1991, a news report in Japan shocked Yumi's family and intensified their fears. The report claimed that North Korea had been abducting Japanese citizens to use them in training programs for spies and operatives. This news led Yumi's family to fear that she might have been kidnapped by North Korean agents during her trip to South Korea. Unable to bear the anxiety, Yumi's parents traveled to Korea themselves, determined to find their daughter. The Korean police took their concerns seriously, but concluded that the likelihood of a North Korean abduction was extremely low. They reasoned that it would be highly unlikely for agents to kidnap a young woman in broad daylight in a busy, tourist-filled area without being noticed. Despite these reassurances, Yumi's family remained convinced that something more sinister was at play. Their suspicions were fueled by strange occurrences after Yumi's disappearance. About a month after she vanished, her parents noticed men loitering around their home in Japan. 3 men in a black car repeatedly circled the house, observing the family for several days. This unsettling behavior led them to believe that these men might have been North Korean agents monitoring their home. Additionally, for a year and a half after Yumi's disappearance, her family received several eerie phone calls. Each time they answered, the caller would remain silent before abruptly hanging up. They had heard rumors that abductees in North Korea sometimes tried to signal their survival to their families through such silent calls. They couldn't help but wonder if these calls were from Yumi, trying to reach out from captivity. Despite these troubling signs, the investigation reached a dead end. No concrete evidence was ever found to support the theory of North Korean involvement, and Yumi's fate remained a mystery. Nearly 30 years have passed since that fateful day, and Yumi's disappearance continues to haunt those who knew her. Since 1992, Yumi's parents have faithfully written to the Gyeongju police station every March, seeking updates on any developments in the case. Their determination to find their daughter has never wavered, despite the years of silence. Tragically, Yumi's father passed away in 2012 without ever seeing his daughter return. Her mother continues to wait, holding on to the hope that Yumi might one day come home. In her dreams, she still sees Yumi walking through the door, a smile on her face, as if no time has passed. The Japanese police continue to receive tips about Yumi's case, but none have led to any breakthroughs. Yumi Ohmasa's story is a tragic reminder of the uncertainty that can accompany travel, especially in a foreign country. Despite the best efforts of her family and law enforcement, her disappearance remains one of the many unsolved mysteries that haunt both Japan and South Korea. Yumi's family, after all these years, still clings to the hope that one day they will learn the truth of what happened to her and perhaps finally bring her home.